Let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone who pulled away right when things got real? Right when it got close? Right when it got true? And you thought, they don't want me. I'm here to tell you, you were wrong. It's not that they don't want closeness. It's that closeness feels like danger to a nervous system that was never taught it was safe. Today, we're gonna crack open what avoidants actually crave and why they can never say it out loud. Let me tell you something about safety that most people get completely backwards. When you watch someone you love pull away the moment things get real, your brain screams one word at you: rejection. You think they're running from you. You think you're not enough. But I need you to understand something that took me years of working with thousands of couples to fully grasp. They are not running from you. They are running from a feeling. And that feeling has a name. Exposure, C. Here's what nobody tells you about the nervous system. Your body doesn't know the difference between emotional danger and physical danger. When an avoidant person starts to feel truly close to you, when the walls come down, when you start to know them, something ancient and automatic fires off inside them. It's not logic, it's not a decision, it's biology. Somewhere back in their story, maybe childhood, maybe a past relationship that shattered them, they learned a brutal lesson. Closeness leads to loss of self. Intimacy meant enmeshment. Love meant losing who they were to keep somebody else happy. And the body remembers what the mind forgets. So when you offer them love, real love, what do they actually feel? Not warmth, not comfort. They feel exposure, like someone just pulled back the curtain and there's nowhere left to hide. And what does every human being do when they feel exposed and unsafe? They protect, they retreat, not because they don't want you, because in that exact moment, wanting you and fearing you have collapsed into the exact same sensation. Now here's the part that will change how you see every avoidant person in your life. What they crave isn't distance. Distance is not the goal. Distance is the coping mechanism. What they are actually starving for, desperately, silently, in a place they can't even access with words, is the felt experience that they can be fully seen and still be free, that they can be known completely and it will not cost them their autonomy, their identity, their air. That's safety. Not the absence of closeness, the presence of closeness without threat. Think about what that means for how you show up. If you chase harder when they pull back, what are you proving to their nervous system? That closeness equals pressure, that love equals loss of control. You are literally confirming their deepest fear in real time. But if you can stay steady, if you can hold your ground without collapsing and without clawing them back in, you start teaching their body something it has never learned. I can come close to this person and I will not disappear. This is the work. This is the real work of loving an avoidant, or of being one and healing yourself. It's not about grand gestures. It's not about proving your love with intensity. It's about becoming a source of consistent, unthreatening presence, showing up the same way again and again until their nervous system finally exhales. Until it learns that this is different. That safety isn't something you demand from them. It's something you become for them. And listen, this isn't weakness and it isn't settling. This is mastery. This is emotional leadership. Because anyone can chase. Anyone can beg for closeness. But it takes real strength to stand in your own certainty, offer steady love without condition, and let someone else find their way to safety in their own time. That is what avoidants crave more than anything else in this world. Not less love, but love that doesn't require them to abandon themselves to receive it. Let's talk about something that trips up almost everyone who's ever loved someone with an avoidant attachment style. You think what they need is more commitment, more declarations, more proof. So you go all in, you tell them exactly how much you love them, you plan the future out loud, you make it clear, this is real, this is forever. And what happens? They freeze, they pull back, they get quiet in a way that terrifies you. And you're left standing there thinking, I just told them how much I care, why did that push them away? Here's the truth, it's not the love that scared them. It's the trap they felt hiding inside it. Every human being on this planet has two competing needs wired into them: the need for connection and the need for autonomy. For most people, those needs coexist pretty peacefully. But for someone with an avoidant pattern, those two needs are in constant brutal conflict. And when connection starts to feel like it's coming at the cost of their freedom, when love starts to feel like an obligation, an expectation, a role they now have to perform, every cell in their body starts looking for the exit. Not because they don't want you, because in that moment, wanting you and losing themselves have become the same threat. So what do they actually crave? They crave being chosen, deeply, fully, unmistakably chosen, but without the sensation of being owned. They want to feel like the most important person in your world, and simultaneously, like they could walk out that door any second, and you would still respect them, still love them, still let them be fully themselves. That combination sounds impossible to most people. It's not. It's actually the highest form of love there is, because it requires you to hold someone close with an open hand instead of a closed fist. Think about the difference between being pulled towards something and being pushed by something. When you're pulled towards something, you move because you want to. You feel expansive, you feel free. But when you're pushed, even gently, even lovingly, you feel obligated. You feel like you owe something. And an avoidant person can feel that difference instantly in their body before their mind even has words for it. The moment love starts to feel like an expectation they have to live up to, it stops feeling like love and starts feeling like performance. This is why grand declarations, guilt trips, and where's this going conversations tend to backfire so badly with avoidant partners. It's not that the questions are wrong, it's that the pressure behind them signals a trap. What works instead is creating a dynamic where they get to keep choosing you over and over without ever feeling cornered into it. You become someone they walk toward, not someone they're required to answer to. And here's what's fascinating. When you stop demanding the commitment and instead become someone genuinely worth walking toward, something shifts. The avoidant person starts to relax, because now closeness isn't a cage, it's a choice. And every time they choose you freely without pressure, they build a tiny bit more trust that intimacy doesn't have to cost them their identity. This is the paradox you have to master. The tighter you hold on, the more someone with this wiring will need to pull away just to remember who they are. But the more room you give them to choose freely, the more they'll choose you again and again and again. That's not weakness, that's not passivity. That is emotional mastery. Because real love was never about capturing someone. It was always about creating a space so safe, so free, so alive that the person you love simply cannot imagine walking away from it, even though they know every single day that they could. Let's get into something that confuses almost everyone who's ever loved someone with an avoidant pattern: the withdrawal. That moment when things are going beautifully, when you're closer than you've ever been, and suddenly they go quiet. They need space, they pull back. And your mind immediately jumps to the worst conclusion: this is it, this is where it ends. But I want you to understand what's actually happening underneath that retreat, because it's not what you think. For an avoidant person, pulling back isn't a decision they're making about you. It's a test they're running, often unconsciously, on whether love is conditional. Somewhere in their history, closeness came with strings attached. Maybe affection had to be earned. Maybe love disappeared the moment they had a need, an opinion, a boundary of their own. So they learned, deep in their nervous system, that intimacy is fragile, that if they show the wrong side of themselves, if they ask for space, if they're anything less than perfectly available, love will vanish. That belief becomes a silent, private terror. If I pull back even slightly, will I lose everything? So here's what they actually crave, more than almost anything else: permission. Permission to step back without the relationship collapsing. Permission to need quiet, need distance, need a night alone with their own thoughts without that becoming a crisis. What they're desperately hoping for, without ever being able to say it out loud, is proof that love can survive their retreat, that you won't punish them for pulling away, that you won't spiral, won't panic, won't turn their need for space into a referendum on the relationship. Think about what happens most of the time instead. The moment an avoidant partner pulls back, their partner panics. Texts multiply. Questions turn into interrogations. What's wrong? Did I do something? Talk to me. And I understand why, because from your side, retreat feels like rejection, and rejection triggers your own fear. But from their side, that flood of anxious pursuit confirms the exact thing they were afraid of, that their need for space is dangerous, that it damages the relationship, that pulling back means losing you. So next time, they'll pull back even harder, even faster, even earlier, because now there's evidence that space is a threat to the bond itself. This is the cycle that destroys so many relationships with avoidant partners, and it's almost always driven by good intentions. You chase because you're scared of losing them. They retreat further because your chasing confirms their deepest fear. Nobody's wrong here, but everybody's stuck. Here's how you break it. You let the retreat happen without treating it as an emergency. You say simply, take the space you need. I'm not going anywhere. And then, this is the hard part, you actually mean it. You don't send 6 follow-up texts disguised as casual check-ins. You don't punish them with coldness when they come back, teaching them that retreat has consequences. You let their nervous system experience over and over a radical new pattern. I can step back, and love is still here when I return. That is how trust gets built with someone wired this way. Not through grand gestures of devotion, but through 1,000 small moments where withdrawal doesn't lead to abandonment or punishment. Every time you stay steady while they retreat, you are quietly rewriting a belief that's been running their relationships for years. You're proving that they don't have to be perfectly available, perfectly present, perfectly on to be loved. They can have an off day. They can need silence. They can retreat into themselves for a while and still come back to open arms, not a courtroom. That's the permission they're truly craving. Not permission from you in words, permission demonstrated in your behavior over time until their body finally believes what their mind has never dared to trust, that this love doesn't disappear just because they needed a little room to breathe. Let me tell you about a moment that happens in almost every relationship with an avoidant partner. The moment where love turns into a project. You notice the pattern. You read the books. You start to understand attachment theory, and suddenly you think you've cracked the code. So what do? You start helping. You point out their patterns. You explain their behavior back to them. You say things like, you're pulling away because of your attachment style, or you know this is a fear response, right? And you say it with love, you really believe you're helping them grow. But something strange happens instead. They shut down harder. They get defensive. They pull further away, right when you thought you were finally getting through to them. Here's what's actually going on. The moment you start diagnosing someone, even lovingly, even accurately, you've unintentionally turned them into a problem to be solved. And nobody, not one single human being on this planet, wants to feel like they are a project their partner is managing. They want to feel like a person their partner sees. There's a world of difference between those two things, and an avoidant person can feel that difference instantly. What they actually crave is understanding, not correction. They crave a partner who can sit with their fear, their withdrawal, their contradictions, without trying to immediately fix it, explain it, or optimize it away. Because here's the truth. They already know something is off in how they love. They've felt the confusion in past relationships. They've seen the hurt in someone's eyes when they pulled away and couldn't explain why. Trust me, they don't need you to point out the pattern. They're already painfully aware of it. What they need is someone who can look at that pattern and say, without judgment, I see you. I'm not scared of this part of you. You don't have to hide it from me. This is where so many well-meaning partners get it wrong. They think empathy means analysis. They think if they can just help their avoidant partner understand why they do what they do, the behavior will change. But understanding doesn't come from being explained to, it comes from being met. When you meet someone in their fear, instead of narrating it back to them, something shifts. Their nervous system, which has spent years bracing for judgment or rejection, finally gets to relax. Because now closeness isn't a diagnostic exam. It's a shelter. Think about the difference between these two responses when an avoidant partner pulls back. I know you're avoidant. This is classic fear of intimacy. You need to work on this. Versus, I notice you got quiet. That's okay. I'm here whenever you're ready, and there's no pressure. The first one, even if true, makes them feel exposed and analyzed. The second one makes them feel safe enough to eventually open up on their own terms. One is a lecture. The other is a hand extended without demand. Being understood also means letting go of the need to have their behavior make immediate sense to you. You don't need a full explanation in the moment. You don't need them to articulate their fear perfectly before you offer them compassion. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is simply, I don't fully get it, but I trust that this is real for you, and I'm not going anywhere. That single sentence does more to build safety than 100 accurate observations about their attachment style. This is the shift that changes everything, moving from trying to fix someone to trying to know them. Fixing says, you are broken, and I have the answer. Knowing says, you are human, and I want to understand your world, even the parts that don't make sense to me yet. One creates distance disguised as help. The other creates the exact safety that allows real change to happen, not because you pushed for it, but because, for the first time, they didn't have to defend themselves against being loved. There's a moment that happens early in relationships with avoidant partners that most people misread completely. You do something big, a grand gesture, a declaration of love, an overwhelming display of passion and devotion, because you're excited, because you feel it, because you want them to feel how much you care. And instead of drawing them closer, you watch something close off behind their eyes. They get overwhelmed, they get distant, and you're left standing there thinking, I just gave them everything. Why did that push them away? Here's what almost nobody understands about this dynamic. Intensity to an avoidant nervous system doesn't register as love. It registers as risk. Big emotional swings, dramatic declarations, high-stakes conversations about the future. All of that spikes their internal alarm system because intensity has historically been unpredictable, and unpredictable has historically been dangerous. If love shows up in bursts, big highs, followed by silence, followed by another big high, their body starts bracing for the crash before it even happens. They can't relax into something that feels like a roller coaster, no matter how good the highs feel, because the drops are what their nervous system remembers. So what do they actually crave? Not more passion, not bigger gestures. They crave consistency. They crave a partner who shows up the same way on Tuesday as they did on Saturday. Someone whose love doesn't spike and dip based on mood, based on how the last conversation went, based on how connected they felt that morning. Consistency is the language safety speaks. It's not exciting, it's not cinematic, but it is the single most powerful thing you can offer, someone whose trust was built on shaky ground. Think about what predictability actually does to a nervous system that's been on high alert for years. Every time you show up the same steady way, not overly intense, not withdrawn, not chasing, not punishing, you are handing their body evidence. Evidence that this relationship isn't going to require them to manage your emotional weather. Evidence that they don't have to perform excitement to keep you engaged, and they don't have to brace for chaos when things get quiet. Calm, steady presence is what finally allows their guard to come down. Not because you convinced them with words, but because you proved it with hundreds of ordinary, unremarkable days. This is genuinely counterintuitive for most people because our culture tells us that love should feel like fireworks. We're taught that big romantic gestures are how you prove devotion. The surprise trip, the dramatic declaration, the over-the-top proof of commitment. And with plenty of people, that lands beautifully. But with someone wired for avoidance, intensity often reads as pressure, and pressure triggers retreat. What actually builds trust with this kind of partner is almost the opposite of what romance movies teach us. It's the small, steady, unglamorous stuff, following through on what you said you'd do, responding the same way whether you're annoyed or not weaponizing affection, withholding it when you're upset, flooding them with it when you're not. Over time, this consistency does something remarkable. It starts to lower the stakes of intimacy itself. Closeness stops feeling like something they have to manage or brace for, and starts feeling like weather they can simply live in. That's when real trust begins to take root, not in the big cinematic moments, but in the quiet accumulation of 1,000 reliable ones. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about being boring or emotionally flat. You can still be passionate, still be affectionate, still bring energy and depth to the relationship. The key is that it doesn't swing wildly based on your mood or their behavior. Steady doesn't mean small, it means dependable. And for someone who has spent their life associating closeness with unpredictability, dependable isn't dull. Dependable is the safest, most seductive thing in the world. There's a moment that defines whether a relationship with an avoidant partner survives or collapses, and it has nothing to do with how much you love them. It's what you do the instant they pull away. Because here's what almost everyone gets wrong. They treat the withdrawal like a fire they need to put out immediately. They chase, they call, they show up at the door. They need the reassurance right then, in that moment, because their own anxiety can't tolerate the silence. And I understand that instinct completely, but I need you to understand what it does on the other side of that dynamic. When someone with an avoidant pattern feels chased the moment they pull back, something happens that most people never see coming. The door they were planning to walk back through on their own suddenly feels like it's being kicked down. What should have been a natural return becomes an obligation. An obligation to this kind of nervous system feels like exactly the trap they were pulling away from in the first place. So instead of coming back sooner, they retreat further, just to prove to themselves that the choice is still theirs. Here's the truth about what they actually crave, more than almost anything else in this dynamic. They want to come back to you on their own terms. Not because you pursued them into it, not because guilt or pressure or fear of losing you dragged them back to the table. They want the return to be a choice they made freely, in their own time, from their own internal readiness, because that's the only kind of return that feels safe to them. A return that isn't a choice is just another version of being controlled. And control is the exact thing their whole nervous system has been organized to escape. This is where you have to develop something most people never learn. The discipline to leave the door open without standing in the doorway. Leaving the door open means they know without a doubt that you're still there, still care, still want them. But standing in the doorway means hovering, checking in, needing updates on when they'll be ready. One says, I trust this enough to let it breathe. The other says, I need you to hurry up and reassure me. And an avoidant partner can feel that difference from a mile away. Think about what it does to someone when they retreat and discover, upon return, that nothing fell apart in their absence, that you didn't punish them with coldness, that you didn't interrogate them about where they went emotionally, that you simply welcomed them back, warm and unbothered, like their absence didn't threaten the foundation of what you have. That experience is rare for people with this attachment style. Most of their lives, retreat has come with consequences. Someone else's anger, someone else's hurt, someone else's need to make them feel guilty for needing space. When you don't do that, you become something they've rarely encountered, a safe harbor that doesn't require an apology for having sailed away. Over time, this is what teaches them they can trust their own instincts around you. They start to realize that pulling back doesn't have to mean losing you. And more importantly, that coming back isn't dangerous either. That's the real transformation, not that they stop needing space, because they probably always will to some degree, but that the space stops carrying so much fear. It becomes just space, not a countdown to abandonment or a test they might fail. This is the final piece of the puzzle, and maybe the hardest one to master, because it asks you to hold two things at once, genuine love and genuine patience, without collapsing into anxiety when they're not the same distance apart. But when you can do that, when you can let someone choose you again and again without ever forcing the choice, you give them the one thing avoidant people crave most and can almost never ask for directly: the freedom to love you without losing themselves in the process.